Since the 1960s, adventurous types around the world have made bad trips to California. After losing 4 games in a row, 3 of them in California, the Toronto Maple Leafs are feeling stunned and need to reassess their entire situation. Toronto reached a new breaking point after losing 4-3 in overtime to the Anaheim Ducks on Sunday, taking a 3-1 lead in the process. After 6 consecutive first-round playoff losses, there are widespread calls for major changes in the organization that could include the sacking of head coach Sheldon Keefe or general manager Kyle Dubas. Toronto is a market with a million shots even on a slow news day, and with the Maple Leafs crawling to a 4-4-2 record on the easiest part of their schedule, it's time to consider all the options the team can take on. We'll consider this a group therapy if you want. Maple Leafs is rocking after a tough ride. Fire Sheldon Keefe. Keefe has been on the bench since November 2019, taking over from Mike Babcock, who was fired after the team walked out the door. History has a strange way of repeating itself, but the circumstances are different. Babcock was initially praised for his ability to get a young team off the field, but eventually adjusted and his hard-hitting methods of handling tough, old-school ways. Players came under fire. With an extensive player development history with the Toronto Marlies of the AHL, Keefe was considered the right man for the job. He's still well-liked within the organization, but patience is running out among his fan base. It would definitely be inappropriate timing for the Maple Leafs to fire Keefe. Last summer, Bruce Cassidy, Peter DeBoer, and Jim Montgomery were on hand, all with the resume and pedigree to gain credibility on the roster, while appeasing their fan base. Of course, we don't want to recycle the same list of 40 people that are constantly being considered, and Maple Leafs could use this as a time to explore alternative options and rising stars in the industry. The story continues. Barry Trotz is available and recently spoke about his interest in leading an Original Six team. Trotz said no decisions were made immediately, and he enjoyed a short rest from coaching after being incomprehensibly dumped by the New York Islanders last spring. Trotz is the NHL's premier defensive specialist, and will overhaul Toronto's trend of playing a dangerous run-and-gun style game. He is the 3rd highest paid coach in NHL history. Trotz would be a notable upgrade over Keefe. It's just a matter of whether he wants the job if Keefe is sacked. There are stylistic reasons for Keefe's dismissal. Under his watch, the Maple Leafs have been an excellent team in the regular season, but they are still prone to defensive gaps, and in the first 10 games of this year the gaps have turned into complete defensive neglect. Austin Matthews is unable to score anywhere near the pace needed to score 60 goals again, and Toronto's high-powered starting 6 forwards look stagnant, and the team's overall possession numbers show they're playing at league average. Average is not good enough. There's also a practical consideration. If the Maple Leafs are looking for immediate impact, the path to immediate results can be more easily accelerated by changing the coach, not the general manager. Depending on the situation, Keefe might get the axe instead of Dubas, but you can argue that both are equally responsible for the mess the Maple Leafs find themselves in. Fire Kyle Dubas. As part of our season preview, I wrote about how Kyle Dubas is facing the final referendum, entering the 7th year of the Matthews-Mitch Marner term. October is now ending and the proverbial vote on Dubas can be swiped up. Toronto's struggles are a direct reflection of Dubas. He built the current roster in his own face, choosing speed and skill above all, rejecting the notion that the Maple Leafs ultimately required more courage or determination to get through the first round and beyond. Dubas has come under criticism for his approach to staffing, particularly the idea of paying his stars best in the market and filling the squad with senior minimum deals. Dubas is almost certainly aware of the calls for his job. Traveling to California to watch Toronto's road stand, the traveling media contingent asked Dubas to update reporters on the team's situation. Maple Leafs PR declined the request, stating that their media appearances were often pre-planned. On its own, it's fair game. Let's put it this way though, of course, the Maple Leafs, and by extension Dubas, have to know that they're the best story in the league, and that questions about the team's future won't preclude a smash-hit streak. Initially lauded as one of the first proponents of analytics, the rest of the league has captured and applied Dubas' data-driven decision-making style. And when you build a roster that is as talented as the Maple Leafs and consistently underperforms to expectations, there has to be a measure of guilt. Maple Leafs Vice President Hayley Wickenheiser is up for promotion, and having an in-house option could certainly make her uncomfortable decision to fire Dubas a little easier to stomach. Trade one of the stars. Toronto's core consists of the reigning Hart Trophy winner at Matthews, star forwards Marner, John Tavares, and William Nylander, and veteran defenders Morgan Rielly, TJ Brodie, and Jake Muzzin. Let's start at the beginning. Matthews is the only player who cannot and should not be traded under any circumstances. Muzzin is currently in long-term injured reserve with neck injury, which frees up $5.625 million of Toronto's LTIR pool. There hasn't been a clever internal solution to account for Muzzin's minutes, especially Justin Hall is struggling miserably without his regular partner, and the team is said to be interested in tracking down 24-year-old Arizona Coyotes star defender Jacob Chychrun. Left-handed with a burst shot and a checkered injury of his own. Pursuing Chychrun without trading a core member seems like the Maple Leafs' optimal solution, but a first-round pick will likely require a top potential and promising young and established NHL player like Nick Robertson or Matthew Knies. Rasmus Sandin. Persisting in the future to save what's left of the present. As for extracting value from the rest of the kernel, it's also tricky. Marner has a cap of $10.93 million in 2024-25, and more specifically, and also has a built-in no-action clause. Despite often facing harsh criticism that most players of his stature avoid, Marner aspires to be a lifelong member of his childhood. His renunciation of his club and NMC seems incomprehensible. Also, given Marner's contract status and his value as one of the top 20 players in the league, there doesn't seem to be a clear hypothetical trade in the mix. Matthew Tkachuk was given to the Florida Panthers and the Colorado Avalanche would certainly not trade. Mikko Rantanen, the star quarterback of Toronto. Nylander's record is just under $7 million, which is a bargain for the Maple Leafs. Unless there's a player entering his best period with a below-market deal, or a series of first-round picks if they decide to add some flexibility in the future, there's no reason for them to trade him. Tavares was arguably Toronto's best starter of the year, but he's 32 years old and the Maple Leafs are unlikely to find anyone to copy his immediate worth. Despite struggling to start the year, it seems highly unlikely that they'll break Rielly Brodie's best defensive duo, as the Leafs are in flux, especially due to injuries to defensive core Muzzin and Timothy Liljegren. In theory it would be very easy to send it to a swap, but it's easier said than done to figure out who the next pieces might be. Stay on course. No one will blame you if you start booing here, but maybe the best way is to get it back. Marner remained on the bench after a series of errors that resulted in 2 Ducks goals on Sunday, and were among the star players selected by Keefe for underperforming the year. And yet, he doesn't take it personally. After Sunday's game, Marner prepared for the us versus the world complex. Last year we started much worse and everybody tried to mess up our brains, Marner said after the game on Sunday. It won't happen to us. We'll be back home now. It's time to pack. This content is unavailable due to your privacy preferences. Update your settings here to see. With the exception of Tavares and Nylander, Toronto's stars aren't good enough to start the year. There's plenty of room for optimism surrounding Matthews, however. He leads the NHL on shots and takes penalties at 5v5, while he ranks second in individual expected goals and chances, according to Natural Stat Trick. Matthews, there will be an eruption of Vesuvius soon, and the Maple Leafs should reasonably follow his lead. There's a lot of hostility towards a core group that has flared up in 6 consecutive first-round series. We're also talking about a group that won at least 57% of their regular season games, lost to the Stanley Cup champion in their last 7 games last season, and suffered 2 heartbreaking 7-game losses. Equally matching Bruins' side. We're not trying to make excuses for Toronto's essence, and collective apathy, anger, despair, and indifference are all valid. However, it is worth remembering that there are only 10 matches, and it may be wise to be patient. This content is unavailable due to your privacy preferences. Update your settings here to see. More from Yahoo Sports.